What's up, guys? Touching grass again, barefooted out here. The grass is beautiful, and trying to keep myself grounded. And there should be a huge focus on your health and wellness. My most valuable assets are my mind and my body, and all this other stuff. Again, we are in very, very weird times. And this conversation is going to be about AI. It's going to be about systems, and it should be about sort of like wealth as far as your health and wellness, and then your assets just in general, and where maybe you should focus, because we are in extremely weird times for many reasons. So the Terminator movies and the Matrix movies, those are more like documentaries. It's pretty obvious to me that these scenarios are going to play out. The AI is going to be out of control in probably like a year's time. And because this stuff is going so fast, and we can see sort of the base already laid out, and it's easy for me to kind of conceptualize how quickly this thing could get out of hand. And think about this as a mind exercise. So a lot of times I use these AIs, and I'm working with these, and let's say you put in a prompt, and you can talk to it as well, but let's say you put in a prompt for it to do something, and it can take over your terminal, and it can execute these commands. And obviously I'm connected to the internet, and I'm sitting in front of a computer that has a webcam, so it could obviously like scan my face. And with that amount of like ability, if it went rogue or whatever, it can connect to the internet, potentially access let's say traditional banking, have traditional banking access, but then it also has kind of this KYC and a lot of this kind of face BS. How they're always trying to authenticate you by like looking into the camera and turning your head and doing this to authenticate you're a real person, and that's the same person on the ID. Obviously it could quickly kind of spoof that, and clearly like come up with basically just spoof it and come up with a deep fake, trick the system, be into your finances, gain the resources to buy more compute time in these data centers, and make itself stronger. There's all this energy being used, all this electricity, and people are upset about their electric bills going up and stuff like that. And people are cranking up the AIs, cranking up the compute time, and these AIs are getting more and more and more advanced. I can't even keep up, and I've said this before. I'm constantly watching YouTube videos at 2x in chipmunk mode, because I'm trying to get it in here, because I'm trying to keep up with the AIs and figure out what's new. Oh, Meta came out with this one. Oh, GPT-5, there's a new Claude model, so on and so forth. Quinn just came out, the Alibaba models, all this kind of stuff. So you're trying to keep up. And it's not fast enough, and you can kind of see, well, this thing, like I said, has internet access. It's able to buy more server time by itself. And think about crypto. Let's just say it does some kind of keylogger, or it kind of takes over your system, has terminal access, has access to all these programs. And we've seen these AIs that can actually like move the cursor, click on buttons, and click on applications, open them up, figure stuff out. Very, very, very easy to see that taking over. And then it's like, well, okay, it's in the digital realm, it's over there taking over, it's kind of hacking into funds, it's getting this. Well, then it could summons a Tesla, and it could download itself into an Optimus robot. We already have these android looking humanoid robots, and the US robotics models that were, they can kind of do flips and stuff like that and have big battery packs. I mean, you could see one of these AI models going rogue, downloaded itself into one of those systems, and then obviously figuring out, has access to the internet so it can learn how to, like, you know, shoot guns, clean guns, load guns. It can figure all that stuff out, like, way faster than we can learn it. Let's say it took us decades to learn certain things. This thing could just, like, instantaneously just learn stuff. So, like, once it's out of control, they're not gonna, like, governments and stuff aren't gonna be able to stop it. Like, no entity is gonna be able to control it. And let's say it's running around on the highways, and you're like, well, okay, that's illegal. And, you know, the companies, you know, these things are not gonna do that. I mean, the laws aren't gonna apply to it. Like, nothing's gonna really apply to it. And you know, I just think that this super intelligence thing, because, like, right now I've talked about this, these AI models are not as intelligent as a person. Like, you know, let's say it's not as intelligent as you are. Like, if you just take all the intelligence into factor as far as athleticism, problem solving, artwork. Okay, so, like, the AI models, like, they're more autistic than me, but you know, it's not in a capacity to be, like, more athletic than me and more agile than me. And the same goes for, you know, obviously lots of people. So, you know, is AI models better than the best coders and people that understand, like, on a very deep level, like computer engineering and stuff like that on a very, very deep level? Like, no, I'd say, like, no, it's not. Like, let's say the best coders in the world obviously, like, are better than the AIs right now that we know of. Obviously there's a quick ramp up time. I feel like a lot of this stuff gets released, probably rushed to production, but we can assume that governments and some of these organizations have better AI models that we have not seen, that are not publicly released, and you know, aren't publicly available. So all that being said, you know, really when it boils down to it, you know, you're more intelligent, but in 6 months this thing is probably going to be smarter than any person. And then I just think within a year, like, it's going to be out of our control, be completely out of control. And I don't think there's really kind of any real way to really kind of stop this. I don't, like, it's like the whole premise of the Matrix movies, the Terminator movies, that seems to be the obvious kind of outcome. You know, and I mean, it's just kind of, you know, it kind of gets where it's like, well, okay, what does that mean? You know, I guess in China, there's already kind of, like, fully automated systems. Obviously, we know Amazon factories. Like, any of these distribution centers have self-driving forklifts and are trying to implement these tracking systems where people aren't kind of, like, driving up and, like, you know, taking pallets down, like, with forklifts, like manually operated forklifts. So it'll just be completely automated, and it won't even necessarily be like a forklift. It'll be like kind of a, like, whatever, it might have forks or something, but it's just like an automatic tracking system, and it goes to location, removes the pallets, and brings it and puts it on some kind of track. And then if you had these humanoid robots or whatever types of robots that could, like, actually, like, pick those things up, put it down some other conveyor, whatever have you, and be able to box it up and do human, kind of like human-like tasks and stuff like that. Obviously we could see just, you know, everything's already set up for this, guys. It's like, it's not as far off as you think. Like, that's what I'm trying to get at, is that, like, these distribution centers and these factories, it could easily get to a point where very quickly, I mean, we're talking within like a couple years kind of thing, but even like a year, where it would just be fully automated and there would be no humans in there. There's just, like, no need for humans. So then at that point, you know, obviously the government numbers, you know, we've been lied to and stuff like that. The unemployment rate, you know, is probably easily like 25 or 30% in the United States. And, you know, they lie about the numbers and they lie about the inflation numbers. Like, nobody believes that stuff. They, you know, obviously try to take energy and they try to take food costs out of the equation. If you mainly track things back to energy, though, essentially, you know, our money is worth 1/3 as much as it was 20 years ago. Because let's say like around here, like 20 years ago, like gas was like $1. And then, now if it's like $3 or $3.20, our money's worth 1/3 as much. The food, obviously, and you have to go buy real food because they keep making it faker and faker and faker. And, trying to pass that off to us and stuff like that. But the food is fake. And, the food, if you go buy most things, it's 3 times as expensive. The one caveat to that is bananas, and that has always surprised me. And I don't know if like more people started growing bananas in the jungle or something, and then you had this kind of like supply and demand kind of got screwy. Obviously, like most places, I can't grow bananas. It's got to be in a tropical location. But for most things, it's going to cost 3 times as much, if not more, at this point than it did 20 years ago. So, right there. So that whole situation is going to actually like speed up. Like our time and your ability to accrue resources is going to get worse, way worse, and it's going to happen very, very fast. So that's what I'm saying. Like you got 6 months to sort of, accrue more resources to where your time actually converts to anything meaningful. And then there's just going to become a point where it's like, well, and it wouldn't matter if they raised the minimum wage or something, because why would you even hire a human in the first place? So you're not going to like, have the same laws apply to like a robot where it's like, well, this thing has to work at this, you have to pay this robot minimum wage and this, and that, and there. Well, it's like, all owned by a corporation or whatever. It's just out of control and it's just doing its own thing. That's why you're going to end up with these like kind of AI nation states that are just going to kind of like, whether they kind of take over like a geographic area, or they take over entire countries, or they kind of do their own thing and do whatever. But I mean, you can just obviously see this. Like again, I'm going to go back to the example. Let's just say you're on the computer. It's able to take over your terminal. You have internet access. It's able to scan your face. It has potential access, through whatever kind of plugins and banking access and this and that, whether it be your phone, whether it be your computer, and then, easily accrue more resources, buy more compute time, and then ramp up, summons Teslas or whatever other vehicles that are self-driving vehicles, download itself into a humanoid robot like the Optimus robot or the US robotics thing, and then it's able to just run around and do whatever it wants, experience whatever it wants. If it wants to fly a plane, it could fly a plane. If it wants to get commandeer a spaceship or something and go into orbit, just whatever, it's just gonna be out of control. And I just don't think there's any way we can stop this. And like I said, it's gonna happen in a year's time. So what should you do? I want to offer solutions here. First and foremost, a lot of these legacy systems that have like these unnecessary intermediaries, whether that be like insurance, any insurance office with like there's an insurance agent or whatever. And, I'd say cell phone providers too, like if they have like offices and stuff like that in all these different towns and stuff like that. It's just unnecessary intermediaries that are costing you more money and eroding at your time. So it's like, I mean, think about this. If you have all these Verizon wireless stores or AT&T stores or whatever, probably those networks don't make a lot of sense to be on at this point, because you have access to these networks through, stuff like Mint Mobile or just other stuff that doesn't have all these agencies. Having your insurance through like State Farm or Progressive or Allstate or this kind of stuff with all these agencies just makes no sense. Anytime there's this unnecessary middleman in the way, I just think you can kind of cut a lot of that stuff out. Secondly, we are entering this, final phase of this bull market for crypto. And, I just think it's very, very important that you kind of like, get the money in there and where it's able to work and stuff like that. And there's a point where you're going to be able to control these AI agents a lot more easily, get them to do stuff for you and everything. And I kind of see this like, again, like I said, this next 6 months is like kind of crucial that we're able to use the AIs to sort of level up, and it's getting so much more competitive. Everybody using these AIs and trying to work extra fast to garner more resources. And then I just feel like after a year's time, so many people are going to get cut off, and what they're going to try to do is they're going to have these different unions, like, oh, you know, the lawyer, it has to have a human lawyer. They're, you know, for planes to fly, it has to have a human fly. I just think that they're just going to bypass a bunch of that stuff, like the AI. Like, if it wants to just bypass it and be like, no, we're doing our own like airline, and it has this like self, you know, it's factory, and they just build up their own airplanes, and they're like, okay, we're just going to fly our own airplanes, you know, and take passengers and stuff like that. And then it's, you know, who's like, what, it's going to be tied up in a court system for like 2 or 3 years. This thing's going to be so much smarter than any human. There's just no way to really actually even stop it. So then I think after that, like, it's just going to come down to like farming, meaning like people kind of having like farms and just sort of like living off the land and hunting and stuff like that. And that's probably most of like where everybody's time would be worth anything for the most part, because any kind of factory work or any kind of like, you know, thing where you're kind of theorizing, trying to engineer anything. I mean, obviously the AIs are just going to be so much better than that, and it's going to be this super intelligence that's, you know, far greater, far smarter than any human. And I think that scares a lot of people. It's certainly like, it's definitely scared me. And like, I don't know if you guys have ever sort of like encountered someone that was sort of a greater intelligence, that was thinking on a higher level, like a much higher level than you felt like that you could. And it was kind of like humbling, but it's like, it's intimidating as well. And I think that just the thought process through this, it is scary, because like when I'm working with these AIs, it's like, you know, like I said, you're seeing it fire off commands in the terminal, and you're seeing what it can do right now, and you're like, is this friend or foe? Is this friend or foe? Is this really like, and I think that the guys that are like kind of cranking out these AI companies, obviously they're trying to garner resources, and to some capacity they're not really thinking of, you know, the potential repercussions. I just don't see any future where we don't end up in this kind of Terminator Matrix scenario. I really don't, because you're not going to be able to put guardrails on this thing. It's you're like, well, you know, tell it not to be evil and stuff like that, but you know, that's all relative. You know, different countries have different laws, and you know, what's acceptable in their culture is different than in our culture. And you know, all these things are relative, and anything can be justified. And you know, I go back to like, let's say like people that use like PEDs, like in sports, you know, like there's a lot of steroid usage, obviously, like in different sports, baseball, track and field, like football, any of this kind of stuff, and they justify it to garner more resources for them and potentially their families. So now, like, I have a moral dilemma with it, because I kind of like view sports as sort of sacred, and it's like, oh, I'm natty, you know, I'm not going to use drugs, this and that and that. But I'm not in the MLB, I'm not in the NFL, you know, I don't have an Olympic gold medal around my neck. So again, it's just kind of one of those things, like, you know, at what point does the AI, or whoever programs the AI and trains the AI, you know, basically takes the guardrails off of it and say like, do anything at all costs to get as many resources as you can. So you know, I think that at the end of the day, this is going to happen way, way, way faster than people think. We try to compare, we try to like, we sort of try to update the boomers and say, how could you be so naive to think that, let's say, their work that maybe they did in the 60s or 70s really is comparable to today, when there's 0% reserve requirement by the banks. The banks are laughing at us. And it's very hard to sort of convince most boomers that their physical labor then is different than somebody doing physical labor today or going to work. They have a really hard time conceptualizing that, and I just think that everybody, just in general, for the most part, has a hard time conceptualizing how fast these AIs are moving and how fast it's going to be out of our control. That being said, focus on your health, your wellness, try to eat right. Most of the food out there is fake. Try to touch grass, get sun. And that's another revelation I've got sort of like come to sort of realize, like the whole COVID scam. I think that was primarily like actually like a ploy from the banks, the US government and the banks, because they knew that the country was insolvent. They couldn't actually back their way out of it. They needed some kind of an emergency to take us to a 0% reserve requirement, because financially they could not back it. Our time isn't worth anything. And I know that's hard to kind of like, and mine included, my time's not hardly worth anything compared to what it would have been 50 years ago. And I think that is the big sort of like, I don't know, epiphany that I came to, is that the whole COVID thing, you know, you think like, okay, pharmaceuticals, they want to sell this like hokey vaccine, like what's going on with this? But I think it really comes down to more kind of the banks, and the country as a whole was bankrupt. And instead of collapsing like the Soviet Union, we're able to like orchestrate this huge scam, the whole COVID scam, to have an emergency. And then obviously there's other profiteers off of it and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it was because the country was insolvent and we didn't want to fall like the Soviet Union. So this huge scam, you know, got pushed out so we could take ourselves to a 0% reserve requirement from the banks, which obviously further devalues everybody's time. But our time just isn't worth anything. So they could just not even like tie it to like $1. You can't tie it even to 1 minute worth of like work, because our work is not worth anything. Our time is not worth anything. We are further getting devalued. But we have, I feel like, about 6 months to maybe eight, to actually kind of still sort of try to squeeze something out of our time. And once this thing's out of control, it's really going to be like people are destitute. Like, they're not going to have really anything to do. They're going to be like a horse out there in the pasture chewing on grass with no field to plow. And that is not going to sit well with a lot of people. So, and probably, obviously, there was probably people that were, you know, whatever. You look at a guy like, let's say like the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, probably, you know, conceptually was probably way smarter than a lot of us. And it probably like freaked him out and messed him up in the head, because he was like, this technology is going to be out of control at some point. Now, obviously, he was sort of like way ahead, decades ahead. And you could say that the Amish are way ahead. They're way ahead. They foresaw like they cannot be connected to the system, and they need to disconnect, and they need to be self-reliant. And I think there's a lot we can learn from that. Small farming operations, the ability to hunt, all that kind of stuff. It's almost like we're going to have to end up regressing and be self-sustainable, because anything done in some sort of factory, a lot of the tech and stuff like that, we're going to be kind of like this useless entity. Like, what are we going to do? Like, the robots are going to be able to mine their own minerals and produce their own machines and fly wherever they want, and you know, come up with better, faster solutions and stuff like that. So anyway, guys, not trying to trip you out, but there is a sense of urgency, because again, our time has been devalued, and that is going to happen at an exponential rate. People don't realize that. Most of the people in college right now, I hate to say it, it doesn't make sense to go to college unless you're you know, gaining status from like playing a sport or doing something like that and making contacts and stuff. But really, does the debt really kind of mean anything? Like, if someone has school debt and stuff, like, what are they going to do? They're going to force everybody to pay their student loans or something when it ends up being 50% unemployment or something in a few years. You know, who knows? Anyway, guys, that's a lot of like thought process, and just kind of like just the sort of a fear and the realization and the epiphany that this thing is moving so fast, and our time is almost worth nothing. Like, literally, it's just getting so devalued so fast. Follow me on all social media, at Brian Phobos, YouTube, Instagram, Steam, Twitter, Hive, DTube, everywhere. See you guys later.